Darling, 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 darling.
So it's been a long year. Every new day brings one more tear till there's nothing left to cry. My, how time flies, like the children hiding their eyes, make it disappear. Let's start a brand new year. Darling, Christmas is coming. Listen to the silver bells ringing. Darling, Christmas is coming. Do you believe in angels singing? Darling, the snow is falling, falling like forgiveness from the sky.
Darling, darling,
If I could have anything, what would I want this new year to bring? Well, I'd want you here with me. Take these thorns from my heart, help the healing to start. Let's set this soul world free. Let's start with you and me. Darling, Christmas is coming. Listen to the silver bells ringing. Darling, Christmas is coming. Do you believe in angels singing? Darling, the snow is falling, falling like forgiveness from the sky. So it's been a long year. Every new day brings one more tear till there's nothing left to cry. Darling, Christmas is coming. Listen to the silver bells ringing. Darling, Christmas is coming. Do you believe in angels singing? Darling, the snow is falling, falling like forgiveness from the sky.
darling, 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 darling.
All right, am I on? Hey! All right, wonderful. Hi, good morning, Sojourn Grace Collective. My name's Colby. I'm one of the co-pastors here. Thank you to those of you who have come and joined us in person this morning, and thanks to all of you who are watching us online. We see you on the Facebooks, we see you on the YouTubes. And Mark says we seem to be having technical difficulties. Welcome to Sojourn, Mark. But Mark knows that. I do wonder what that means, though, Mark, so if you could be a bit more specific. Which version of technical difficulties might we be having? Who really knows anymore? In a minute, we're going to have a lighting here with our Advent wreath by a member in our community. We're going to have a few more songs we're going to sing together. We're going to hear a special announcement from someone that we're partnering with during this Christmas season down in Tijuana. I'm going to share a bit of we call it spiritual nuggets, which are like just these bite-sized versions of a sermon, although sometimes my nuggets become like a full chicken tender. And then we're going to end our time together. Thank you for appreciate that. And then we're going to end our time together by taking communion, and I'll walk us through that when we get there. But for now, if you are willing and if you want to, stand if you want to where you're at. We're going to continue singing some Christmas carols here at our time together, so I'm glad you're here. Matthew, back to you.
Noel, the angel did
just a certain poor shepherds in fields as they lay in fields where they lay keeping their sheep on a cold winter's night that was so deep. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. They look at up and saw a star shining in the east beyond them far, and to the earth it gave great light, and so it continued for day and night. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. Noel, 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 born is the King of Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel.
All right. So we're going to light the joy candle. Are you guys coming? The joy of God with us does not come as naive optimism or surface level feel goodness. Joy cannot be imposed from on high. Joy cannot be commanded. The joy of God with us is mingled with grief, exists side by side with mourning, knows that pain and death are all too real, but do not have the final word. This joy tends tenderly to beauty and softness and the gladness that comes from paying attention to what matters. The joy of God with us is collective, liberating us from deadly despair. Joy is gestating in darkness. It comes unexpectedly. Joy invites our expectation and demands our participation. Prepare the way for joy with sorrow. May joy be birthed among, within, and through us this Advent. O come, Emmanuel.
Town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie above thy dark and dreamless sleep. The silent stars go by, yet in thy dark street shineth the everlasting light. The hopes and fears of all the years
stars are met in thee tonight. Fa la la la, fa la la la, fa la 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 la.
The lamplit streets of Bethlehem, we walk now through the night. There is no peace in Bethlehem, there is no peace inside. The wounds of generations, almost too deep to heal, scar the time-worn miracle and make it seem surreal.
Fa la la la, fa la la la, fa la 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 la. The baby in the manger grew to a man one day, but still we try to listen now to what he had to say. Put up your swords forever, forgive your enemies. Won't you love your neighbor as yourself? Let your little children come to me. Fa la la la, fa la la la, fa la 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 la, fa la la la, fa la la, ooh, fa la la la, fa la la, ooh, fa la la la, fa la la, Oh, little town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie above thy dark and dreamless sleep. The silent stars go by.
Let's try that again. Good morning. For those that don't know me, I'm Steven, and as Wesley just shouted out the yay, this is one of our favorite parts as a family, and a good opportunity for us to get to know each other a little bit more this morning. We do this called Collective Conversations, and since, I guess it's been a few weeks now since we've been back in person here at this location, we've approached it slightly differently, where we're encouraging you all to collectively conversate with you all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a question, and I'm going to have you turn around and spend a few minutes talking, and then we'll come back and I'll get your examples, get your ideas, get your answers. And for those virtually, we'd love to see your answers, and I'll peek in the few minutes we're chatting. But the question for today is Christmas music, which we've been hearing some beautiful music this morning. But on Christmas music, which song do you loop, and which song do you skip? So spend a few minutes, stand up, turn around and talk to somebody near you. And then again, those on Facebook or YouTube, post some comments in the chat, and we'll get back to you. All right, it sounds like we're quieting down a little bit. So you guys finish up your chats, and I'll call on some of you. I know one person in the front row with her hand up. But let's check in with a few on Facebook. So I've heard somebody say, I skip all Christmas music. So that's a thing. Lisa, the Bare Naked Ladies holiday album on loop. I didn't know that they made a holiday album. That's probably pretty good. But she skips The Little Drummer Boy after she's heard it 3 times. Loop from Irma Martin, I think that's Colby's mom. Oh Holy Night on loop, and skip Santa Baby and Baby It's Cold Outside.
Yeah. Skip Santa Baby.
That's what it says. I wonder why.
I'm only joining you for YouTube because you've got Facebook.
Because I don't have
YouTube.
those exactly.
Yeah.
What do you got?
YouTube. What's going on, Ashley? Ashley also loops Oh Holy Night, which was what I told Candace I loop as well. But then when my mom said she loops it, I just felt cliche. Like, do I just loop it because my mom looped it?
Maybe.
So.
There are worse things.
William loops Sufjan, which is a good choice. And Okama Emmanuel, and Charlie Brown.
Oh, Charlie Brown. What about in the room? So, Wesley, what do you skip and what do you loop?
So, I loop like to Alvin and I would like to loop Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Alvin and the Chipmunks on loop.
just bringing some cheer to your morning.
Yeah. The soundtrack.
Nice. New Grinch movie.
Yeah, you do.
That's fun.
What's your quick
Yeah,
skip?
you do.
Anything?
Slow, sadder Christmas. I'll have a blue. Matthew says that's what I loop. That's really funny. Okay, so we've got skipping the Chipmunks. Shane on YouTube says that he was introduced to Santa Baby as a parody with Voldemort. Voldy Baby. Voldy Baby. You've heard it too? Okay, I guess we have homework. Go listen to Voldy Baby.
Anybody else inside the room?
Has anyone skipped the Christmas shoes yet? Because that's truly the worst.
Jazz wants to advocate for Christmas shoes skipping.
Reminds me of one that I always forget about, which is the hippopotamus for Christmas. Ridiculous and
It's really funny.
and maybe contentious, but I definitely skip the Paul McCartney Christmas time.
Yeah.
I kind of love him, but I can't.
The word is out.
Yeah.
Is it? All right. Thank you, Stephen, for leading us this morning. I've got just a couple house notes. And the first, that's a rambunctious, I liked that. It's a small but mighty crowd. We have in the back, I believe, back where Laura's at. Laura, would you give a wave? We got these info cards, which are like brochure type things at the bottom. There's a tear off portion. You can put your name and email address and put it in that box next to that. And what that does is that just triggers a series of automated emails that we send over a couple weeks to just introduce ourselves so that you can know a little bit more about Sojourn and who we are and why we do what we do. And then the second thing I want to tell you about is the Joy Box. And this is the way that we talk about giving here at Sojourn Grace. Many of us might have grown up in churches where they passed an offering plate, had ushers come forward, had a whole special music offertory, shout out to the offertory. And we've just never done that at Sojourn. We have wanted to do our best to unlock people from a sense of giving from a place of guilt or obligation. And instead we ask, well, what if we can give from a place of joy? What if we catch the idea and the vision and the mission of a place like a Sojourn, which is to foster spiritual, social, and emotional wholeness, and to be a safe place for people who need healing from whatever it is in their life, and to be a brave space for those who are looking for growth and transformation. What if we got caught up in that vision and said, yeah, you know what, that's something that I want to see exist in the world. And so if that's you and you want to support us, you can do that online at sojourngrace.com/donate. We also unlocked our Venmo account, so you can go at Sojourn Grace on Venmo and give that way. And that's wonderful. And then I'm going to invite my friend Vicky up. So you grab this microphone. And Vicky's going to tell us about the next note. Watch your steps here. Yeah, you like that, Anissa? You like how I avoided that? And thank you. Just keep turning off That's because the batteries are dying. Awesome. I just replaced these last week. It worked for now. Talk fast. Who knows? We got more chipmunks for you.
So, hello, everybody. I want to invite you to open your hearts to our sister, organization in Tijuana. And we're gonna put a video of the message that they have for us. It's an organization we have been partnering with for the last 5 years. And they have been just serving their community. It's a low economic community in Tijuana, and they have 36 kids. And before COVID, we used to go visit them once a quarter, play games with them, celebrate together. And some of you have been with us in those visits. But with COVID, what we want to do is we want to at least support them with money. And we want to be as mindful as possible of their needs in this time. So I invite you to watch the video. After the service, Nancy, raise your hand. Nancy is going to be with a booth on that side. So you can say Feliz Navidad from the Holstons or from the Jasons or from just the family name. It's a quick video that we're going to put together for them when we send them the money. So thank you. Oh, there are 3 layers. In the past, we used to put that 3 with the names of the kids. With the names of the kids. And each family pick up a name and get the present, etc. But we're not going to Tijuana yet. It's a bit complicated. So, but you can donate. There are 3 ways to do it. 3 amounts or whatever suggested. So you can see if I give $20, that is good for these many things, or $40 for these many things, whatever. So again, just with an open heart, watch the video, and thank you. ¿Quieres, por favor, presentarte a las personas de Soyo?
Sí, claro que sí. Mi nombre es María Esther Figueroa Torres.
Oye, María, y platícanos un poquitito de ustedes. ¿Cuánto tiempo lleva Unidos por Siempre?
Aproximadamente tiene 20 años. Unidos por Siempre nació el 12 de octubre del 2002.
Wow, son muchos años. Y me imagino que han ido creciendo poco a poco. ¿Ahorita cuántos niños tienes?
Tenemos un total de 36 niños en total. Tenemos, si no me equivoco, tenemos 8 adolescentes y tenemos como 28 niños menores de 14 o 15 años hasta 1 año.
¿Y qué esperan en Navidad? ¿Cuáles son los planes que están haciendo?
Pues eso es lo que queremos saber, que ahora sí, ¿qué preparativos podemos hacer? Como siempre, para ayudar a cada niño. Queremos preparar lo de la cena navideña, alguna piñata, alguna posada, dulces, comida, regalos principalmente.
Uh-huh. ¿Y por qué es importante en México la cena de Navidad?
Es lo que simboliza la unión de la familia, la unión de la bendición. La cena no es la Navidad, la cena es la Nochebuena, que es el 24, que para nosotros significa el nacimiento del niño Jesús. Es cuando todos los niños se reúnen y los niños felices porque el niño Jesús está naciendo o va a nacer.
Muy bien. Y finalmente, ¿tienes algún mensaje para nuestra familia, la comunidad de Soyo?
Claro que sí. Quiero, primero que nada, brindarles un fuerte, fuerte abrazo a todos, a toda la iglesia de Soyo. Que Dios me las bendiga. Espero que nos ayuden, que ayuden a mí no especialmente, a todos los niños que tenemos aquí, a cada uno, porque ellos están con la ilusión de que quién nos va a ayudar, que soy yo no nos olvide. O sea, yo los invito a compartir un poquitito, no es mucho, un poquitito de lo que Dios nos ha dado. Quiero decirles que mil gracias, son bienvenidos y nosotros somos unidos por siempre.
Gracias, María. Un abrazo.
Gracias, Vicky.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, go back to the slide right before that. See if we can hang there for a second. So just to recap, if you would like to participate with us in blessing Unidos por Siempre this year for Christmas, the I think brilliant way that Vicky and Alyssa helped sort of think this through is a $25 gift. Look, that goes towards their big Christmas meal. If you want to go $40, that covers some food and helps get some clothes for the kids. And if you want to go up to something like $50 or more, it's enter your own amount. When you go to sojournggrace.com/donate, you'll see the drop-down option to pick Unidos por Siempre, the giving tree, and you can enter whatever amount you want. But these are sort of the ideas that we had, the target range for ways to support that. And then just, again, reminder, after we do our communion outside, Nancy will have a space where you can just do a quick filming of saying Feliz Navidad from whomever you would like to wish that from. That sound good? Is there any questions? I mean, I guess we can field questions. Okay, that's the correct response, because I don't really ask. And then the last thing to say is that we are, as a church, when we started, my wife and I, Kate, who's not here this morning, we knew that from the get-go, we would be a church that would place a high premium on not burning out our families and our volunteers around the holiday time. And so one of the things we decided to do is not have a traditional Christmas Eve service, which growing up was always a part of my tradition, and then in my 15 years of ministry in different giant churches, like it just became to be this sore spot in our family where, God, there was one church I worked at where we did like 5 services on Christmas Eve. So it was just 12 hours at the church, no family time. The volunteers just go to, Anissa knows what I'm talking about. People who grew up like that just begin to resent the holiday season a little bit. So we thought, well, what if it's Sojourn? Because we still think it's a precious time of year to get together and to sing carols and do traditional lightings of candles. And so we do Christmas Eve service. See, we get ahead of it just a little bit. So on December 23rd every year, we get together for a night of carols and candles. And we're going to be here in this space at 7 p.m. on December 23rd, as well as with you on the live stream. So we invite you to come and be a part of that as well. All right, band, why don't you come on up and continue to lead us in some music this morning. And then Francesca, you and the kiddos, if you want to, it's kind of dark that way. So if you go first, open the door, it'll let some light in. But yeah, Wesley's got it. I don't want anybody to trip. So that's fantastic. All right. Yes, thank you.
Frosted window panes, candles gleaming inside, faded candy canes on a tree. Santa's on his way, he's filled his sleigh with things for you and for me. It's that time of year when the world falls in love. Every song you hear seems to say, Merry Christmas, may your New Year dreams come true. And this song of mine in 3/4 time wishes you and yours the same thing too. It's that time of year when the world falls in love. Every song you hear seems to say, Merry Christmas. same thing too.
It came upon a midnight clear, that joyous song of old, from angels bending near the earth to touch their harps of gold. Peace on the earth, goodwill to all, from heaven's all gracious gift. The world in solemn stillness lay to hear the angels sing. Still through the cloven skies they come with peaceful wings unfurled, and still their heavenly music floats o'er all the weary world. whose forms are bending low, who toil along the climbing way with painful steps and slow. Look now for red and golden hours come swiftly on the wing. Rest beside the weary road and hear the angels sing. Oh, rest beside the weary road and hear the angels sing.
Masks and headset mics do not go together well. Take one off, they both come off. Jazz, I'm going to borrow your music stand. Thank you. Zeke, I'm going to borrow your stool. Friends, I'm going to borrow your patience. Have you noticed how, I don't know the timeline on this, maybe the last 10, 15 years, how obsessed Hollywood has been with the origin story? This seems to be a new thing. Sequels are so like 90s. We want prequels now. Give us the story before the story. I've been obsessed with origin stories, as though there's something about understanding the why behind a character, what makes them tick, how did they get the way they are? There's something in there that it fascinates us, for instance, to discover that a small boy can be bitten by a radioactive spider and suddenly have superhuman powers. It might disturb us to discover how the societal mistreatment of a traumatized man might lead to him painting his face in a peculiar way and exacting revenge on those who have wounded him. We might be inspired to learn about a young individual who is brilliant mind, and yet has this motor neuron disease, and yet still goes on to become one of the greatest physicists of our time. Or maybe the origin story stirs us to a sort of compassionate empathy when we learn how a greedy fashion designer who seems to have this penchant for clothes made from the furs of puppies tragically grew up as an orphan, struggling on the mean streets of London. Whatever it is, there's this power in the origin story that it adds this depth, this nuance to the character. It takes them from this flattened, reduced, one-dimensional person, and it adds depth to them in a way where we're suddenly far more intrigued, interested, fascinated, disturbed, moved to compassion. One of the key factors in any good origin story is a person's family line, where that person came from, the systems from whence they came. So with this in mind, this Hollywood fascination with origin stories, and since it is Christmas time, and since we're in this series that we've been calling Words of Our Heritage, where we examine, re-examine, explore some of the ideas and the words and the concepts of our particular religion's heritage, I was thinking about the origin story of Jesus, especially in the Gospel of Matthew. And I wonder how many of you recall how this origin story begins in Matthew. Chapter 1, verse 1, the author begins with these riveting words. A record of the ancestors of Jesus, who is the Christ, the son of David and the son of Abraham. Now, Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was the father of Jacob, and Jacob was the father of Judah and all of his brothers, and Judah was the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar, and Perez was the father of Hezron, and Hezron was the father of Ammon, and so on and so forth for about another 25 names. Just this long genealogical list that Matthew attempts to use to connect Jesus to being the son of David, and then traces all the way back to Abraham. And maybe this isn't the most exciting way to start your story. I grant you that. But in the world of the authors who come to make up what we now call the Bible, it's kind of par for the course in many ways. Because fun fact, there are like 25 genealogical lists in the Bible. And even the biggest Bible nerds among us get to these genealogical lists and we're like, okay, the story continues. Like, boring. And yet, be that as it may, this is the word and the idea I want to explore with you in this morning's spiritual nugget, the word genealogy. Genealogy. Because what might seem on the surface to be just a random, arbitrary, boring list of names that shows some kind of familial lineage, I think actually helps point to something deeper about the human experience. And this is what I think it illuminates. I believe that understanding where we came from, whatever that might mean, understanding where we came from can greatly improve the odds that we will go in the direction that we want to go with our lives. Understanding where we came from greatly improves our chances of becoming the type of people and going where we want to go in life. For me, there's something about the way that many of these authors in the Bible sort of obsess over genealogy that taps into this human need to feel connected to something larger than ourselves, to be rooted in a story that is beyond just our own little world. Within the world of Judaism, that again had 23 genealogical lists in their records. Within that world, they kept these lists and they did this work not to keep a accurate historical, like literal fly on the wall account of all, like that's not the point. Oftentimes we do the Hebrew scriptures or any ancient text a disservice when we take our very modern way of thinking and we look at these ancient texts and we expect them to act and function like we would create our history books today, which is to say it needs to be entirely accurate and true, and all the dates and all the names need to be 100% fly on the wall. This is what happened. But that was not really the purpose of these sort of documents. So genealogies within Judaism were used for a couple things. One, genealogies were used to demonstrate a person's credentials, whether it be for a place of authority or for property, i.e., this position or this land belongs to this person because of this familial line. Genealogies also exist to give a sense of structure to history. Like, here's how we got where we got, so that we know where we want to go. And or genealogies were used to indicate one's character. Well, you can trust old so-and-so because they're the child of so-and-so who comes from so-and-so stock. Or don't trust them because that's their family line. So these were some of the purposes of genealogies, less about the strict. In fact, if you even look at it, and I encourage you to do it, you'll have a fun 3 minutes reading Matthew's genealogy. If you look into that, you'll notice some people get skipped in Matthew's genealogy. Some people get skipped. And then also Matthew's like, there were 14 generations between Abraham and David, and then 14 between David and Jesus. And then when you actually count that second list, there's only 13. So I don't know where the copy editor was on that one. But the point here was not to get this exact, it was to sort of, you're trying to tell a story. And so you might say it like this, that for the Israelites, genealogies were a way of rooting us in a story and a way of grounding us with a sense of identity and belonging. And oftentimes I read these genealogy lists and I just hear Mufasa to Simba, remember who you are. Like this is what these genealogy lists do. And one of the things that I really appreciate about Matthew's genealogical list is how the author of this gospel included parts of the familial line that weren't all that impressive, that weren't all that attractive, that weren't all that, if you were to create, as the author of Matthew was, if you're to create a document with the hope and expectation that you can help connect people with this idea that Jesus of Nazareth is somehow also the long-awaited Messiah that our people have been waiting for, you could see the incentive built in to maybe like polish up some of the blemishes, to maybe smooth out some of the wrinkles. And yet when you read this genealogical list and you see things like the inclusion of non-Jewish individuals, you see the inclusion of people that might have had a kind of a sketchy occupation or maybe some questionable life choices. You see the inclusion of characters that didn't really make it on a lot of genealogical lists, and by that I just mean women. Most ancient genealogies were just son of, father of, and yet here is Matthew listing Tamar and Ruth and Mary. So one of the things that I love about Matthew's genealogy is it's almost as though the author was going out of their way to show how Jesus is this culmination of all the parts of humanity. And we say that at Sojourn here all the time. It all belongs. Part of this genealogy is like, yeah, it all belongs. All the flavors of people, all the sizes, all the kinds, it all belongs. This is, side note, by the way, this is part of what bums me out about the Catholic Church's position a while back to take the idea that Jesus was born sinless and then move that even back to Mary, that Mary was also sinless or sinless. And that bums me out because I think both of those moves like remove this connection that Jesus and his mom had to what it means to be human. But anyway, that's a different story for a different day. So I love this about the genealogy, that there's no attempt to hide or to brush over the less pretty parts of the past. There's naming it, there's owning it. Like, this is where we came from. We're not going to pretend otherwise. And this is not, I would argue, and I think you probably would agree with me, this is not something that we, especially here in America, are all that good at. We're not very accustomed to owning and naming our past. We are sort of this American Protestant puritanical work ethic, blah, blah, blah. We are a very future-facing, forward-facing people. And look, a lot of good has come of that. A lot of good has come out of that. The scientific advancements that have come out of this future-thinking perspective has done a lot of good. Global poverty has been, like, the floor has been lifted in some significant ways over the last century. The efforts to curb climate change and to be able to restore some of Mother Earth's best parts back to herself have come to this. We've increased life expectancy like all across the globe and even the quality of life. So the forward-facing, future-facing, like let's just go after it, has done a lot of good. And one of the downsides is this ignoring of where we came from. And that's the best case scenario, right? Is to just ignore. The worst case is to rewrite or to somehow reframe or to detach ourselves from it in some way. And so I think as a society, we do this sort of future-facing, past-ignoring posture to our detriment as a society, and I think that's the same for us as individuals. That is, at an individual level, when we ignore, repress our own pasts, it's to our present and future selves' detriment. So when Matthew's gospel begins with this genealogy of Abraham had Isaac, and Isaac he had Jacob, and Jacob he had Judah and his kin, it's kind of for me this large universal statement about how you can zoom in at a real particular level and get a kind of truth that happens at a granular and a cosmic level. And the truth for me is this, that I believe that we all carry wounds from our past. On a large scale and on our own individual scale. We all carry a kind of wounding from our past. These could be from our early developing years. These could be from our years of adolescence and childhood. I think we all carry wounds. And I submit to you that this is true even in the best, most loving households. Why? Well, because no parent is perfect. We know this. No family system can be perfect. No relationships, whether it's siblings or cousins or extended family, that you can't ensure that that's perfect. No school system is perfect. No society. So even in the best, most loving, most nurturing home environment, there are way too many variables that cannot be controlled that contribute to this theory that we all carry some wounds from our past. We all have parts of our story in which certain needs were not met, or not met consistently and often enough. And for many, these wounds even sort of creep into the world of trauma. Many of us, and I would even argue more than us than we are aware of, and I only say this autobiographically, because it's only been fairly recently in my life that I have been comfortable using the T word with my background. I think many of us carry trauma from these years. And again, if you were like me, I would have heard that a couple years ago and been like, well, that's not me because, and then you fill in the blank of all the other people in your life that you know that had way more traumatic growing up years. And so it's just a game of comparison. But this isn't your sweet little body, your sweet little brain when you were growing up. It's not how it works. You don't have a universal, objective, totality view of the cosmos to be able to, at 6 years old, be like, well, my trauma's not as bad as all the rest of the people in the world, so chill out. No, your body's like, oh my God, we are stressed out all the time. It's unpredictable, chaos, not safe. And it impacts our brain, it impacts our nervous system, and we grow, and we carry it with us. We carry it with us. So yeah, I think all of us carry some wounds in our pack, wounds from our past that have impacted and still impact who we are today. And it's my understanding, and what I'm learning is that the more that we can understand our past, as best as we can, we're never going to get all of it, and maybe not all of it would even be helpful, but as best as we can understand our past, and this might be through therapeutic processes, this might be through some real deep, intentional personal work, the more that we can name what happened in our past, like actually name it. This might be through spiritual direction. This might, again, be through a process of some sort of therapy. The more that we can understand it, the more that we can name it, and the more that we can try to learn and heal from it is, I think, what then increases our chances that we can become the kinds of people that we want to become. More open, more kind, more compassionate, more loving. But my hunch is, and again, this is maybe just all autobiographical projection. Welcome to Sermons from Colby. My sense is that many of us, we don't do this hard work because it is hard work. There's something to be said for just leaving the past behind, closing that off, and way too scary, way too vulnerable, not going to go there. There's something to be said for that. But I submit to you that the more that we can understand, the better that we can name it, and the more that we can begin to heal from it, it increases the odds, that increases the chances that we will become the type of people that we want to become, that we will have the kind of life that we want to have. I've been thinking about it like this, and I offer this to you as an image. If it's helpful, great. If not, well, That's fine too. But I think our past is kind of like the rudder of a ship. And I did a deep dive this week on YouTube on how rudders work. I don't know that it helped all that much. There's too many science words that I didn't understand. But to the extent that I understand how a rudder works, I think our past is kind of like the rudder. It's small by comparison, and largely it's out of sight. You don't really know it's there. You don't see it. And yet, that little thing is the mechanism that controls where the entire ship goes. Move that little rudder a little bit to the starboard, picking up lingo, to the starboard side. And there's an imbalance now of pressure, and the imbalance of pressure now pushes the hull, H-U-L-L, come on now, we're all learning here together, it pushes the hull also to the starboard side. Little movements in the rudder move the whole ship. I think the things that you've experienced in your past, these wounds, these gaps in your needs being met, or even great experiences of great love and great suffering all contribute to it. But this morning in particular, thinking about the ways in which the blemishes, the pains, the failures, the traumas of our past, all of these make these micro adjustments to the rudder of our life. And I think if we're not conscious of them, if we don't understand them, if we don't look at them, if we don't talk, if we don't name them, if we don't try to learn and heal from them, then we're going to wake up one morning crashed into the side of an iceberg, and we're going to be really surprised by it. Because last we were heading towards this really gorgeous island over here. And I think this is, we describe this in many ways in our culture, don't we? Midlife crisis. What's a midlife crisis? It's, that rudder had been pointing you or steering you towards that iceberg for 40 years, and you had no idea until you crashed. And time to wake up. How did I get here? But when we examine our past, when we seek to understand as best as we can why we are the way we are, when we learn about our history and our family's history, we can, I think, begin to have some power over our rudder. We can slowly make adjustments to the helm. God, this is so fun. To the helm. Guiding our ship more intentionally towards where we want to go. So what I hope to leave you with today is this. I think we have some options, some choice as to the kind of stories that we tell with our life. Not all of it, but I think we do have some power and choice about what kind of story we're telling with our life. We could tell a version of our story that glosses over all of our struggles, that glosses over our past failures, that glosses over our trauma, that looks at that list and be like, no, let's skip that one, let's skip that one. And we could tell the story of our life where we don't name the things in our past that wounded us because we don't know about them, or we know about them but we don't want to name them. That's one version. We could. Or conversely, we could swing it the other way, and we could tell a version of our story, a version of our past that focuses, just zeroes in on all of our struggles, zeroes in on all of our failures and our trauma and our pain. And suddenly we become just this perpetual victim, and that's all that our story is just all the things that happened to us or all the ways in which we lost the plot. But then that becomes the dominant narrative of our life, and I think that will also crash us into an iceberg. So then I think maybe there's this way of holding both of these, where we begin to tell a version of our past that accurately recounts all of our struggles and recounts our triumphs, balances them, where we tell honestly and acknowledge our failures and the lessons that we learned from them, both and a story that courageously names our trauma to the extent that we know it and understand it, and if we've healed or how we've healed. This is the kind of storytelling in our life, the kind of thinking of our past and not just being so forward-facing. This is the kind that I think is a way of moving through our life that God invites us to, if I can be so bold, I think. And this is what stood out to me when I read these 25 names of the genealogical list at the beginning of Matthew. I'm like, oh, there's a way to tell this story that names it, that honors it, that holds it, that doesn't run from it, that doesn't gloss over it, that doesn't hyper-focus on it. Somehow it all belongs. So I close with this. Your past does not define you, but neither does it ignore you. Your past does not define you. You are not just the sins of your father, which I think is an old-timey biblical way of trying to articulate this phenomenon in which we are interconnected to this generational trauma. It just keeps on getting passed down. Your past does not define you, but neither does it ignore you. It is somehow this out of sight, often out of mind rudder that has a heck of a lot more power than we might realize. You are, friends, both more than your past, but you're also a product of it. So the point here today is not that we need to go home and do a big family tree and try and trace our lineage back to Father Abraham, although if you want to do that, that's on your own time, have fun. The point is, I hope that we are invited this morning to see how an understanding of and an appreciation for and a naming and a holding and an honoring of our past is necessary if we want to ensure that we are going in a direction that we want to go in life, rather than having this unconscious rudder doing all the storytelling for us. So may we embrace our mistakes. May we embrace our failures, knowing that they do not define us, nor do they get the last word. And may we seek to heal from the wounding of our traumas as best as we can, believing that we are not broken beyond repair. And may we feel empowered to shape our lives and tell the story that we want to tell. And may it be one that moves us toward greater wholeness. Amen? Can I pray for you? And so, God, I'm uniquely grateful this week for this list of names, this odd way to begin the origin story of Jesus. And I'm grateful for the way it impressed upon my own life to look at to see how looking at my own past has been so life-giving and generative and contributing to my own wholeness, even though it's been and continues to be some of the hardest, scariest work. And I know that I've only just begun. May we as a community do this hard work together. May we hold the space as we embark on this as individuals, and then may we collectively practice this. May this begin to scale up so that, one day we might see entire countries do this sort of work. But I can't control Washington. I can only control me. What story am I telling? I'm grateful that it all belongs. I'm grateful that I do not need to ignore parts of my past. I do not need to repress. I do not need to pretend that it didn't happen, because none of it will ever detract from the truth that I am pure love of God, that I am a beloved child of God. Amen. We're going to close our time together taking communion, and we're going to do it kind of like how we've done it, with a small twist. So since we've been meeting in the school, we've been kind of filing out to the outside there. And Stephen, if you can get that door open so we have some daylight. And then we've been kind of going out there as a big group and getting individual crackers and juice. And that's been good and fine and all, but also not incredibly financially makes the most sense. And it just creates a lot of waste, so environmentally doesn't make a ton of sense. So even though originally we didn't want to go this route, because all the versions that we found had like these weird Bible verses printed on them, and they just felt in some ways a little bit like, we're going to try it for a while. These little individual servings where the bottom is this little cup of grape juice and the top is a peel off like wafer. And so in this moment, some of your neurological systems might be activated a little bit. Some of that trauma might be showing up. And what I want to say to that is that makes a ton of sense. And to the extent that you hear me, and trust me, you're safe here. It's okay. So if you need to not partake today, that's okay. If you want to practice re-engaging with some of these old things in a community of safety and compassion and non-judgment, this is how we begin to heal from some of those wounds. So the way this is going to work is I'm just going to set this on the edge of the speaker right there, and just as we file out, so step one is we're going to together just sort of walk past and grab one of the fellowship cups. I mean, that's as far as names go, that's not a bad name for the little things, right? A fellowship cup. And then we're going to head out there, and hopefully the balls might stop bouncing, but maybe the balls will keep bouncing, and we'll just sort of circle up. And then once we're all out there, I'll lead us in taking the communion together, and then we will be done with our service. And so live stream, this is where we say, God bless to you. Thanks for being with us this morning, and we will see all of you next week. All right, let's head on out together.